intelligence, intelligence, intelligence. Hello. So, let's talk about the word intelligence. It's a noun, specifically an abstract noun, which means it refers to an idea or concept rather than a physical thing. In common usage, intelligence is often associated with a person's ability to think, reason, and solve problems in a quick and clever way. For example, you might say, she has a high level of intelligence, or he showed exceptional intelligence in his exam. One special note about its usage is that the word intelligence can also be used more broadly to describe information or data that's gathered for strategic purposes, especially in fields like business, politics, or national security. This sense of the word often carries a connotation of secrecy and confidentiality, as in, the company had access to sensitive intelligence about their competitors. Here are 3 practical example sentences using the word intelligence with varying contexts. In a formal setting, such as an interview for a position in national security, you might say, the recent developments in artificial intelligence and machine learning have significantly enhanced our intelligence gathering capabilities, allowing us to make more informed decisions about global threats. Here, the context is serious and professional, requiring a polished and objective tone. The word intelligence refers to the collection of sensitive information for strategic purposes. In a casual conversation with friends or colleagues over coffee, you might mention, "I'm not sure how they do it, but that new movie has some seriously advanced intelligence in its plot twists. I mean, who would have thought of that twisty ending?" In this context, the word intelligence is used to describe cleverness or insight, rather than formal information gathering. The tone is relaxed and conversational. In a business or academic setting, such as a conference on data analysis, you might say, "Our latest study on cognitive intelligence in problem solving has shown that diverse teams tend to produce more innovative solutions." Here, the context is professional and analytical, requiring a clear and objective explanation of research findings. The word intelligence refers to human capacity for learning, understanding, and adaptability. So, you want to know about this thing that helps us think and learn quickly? It's basically the ability to use your brain's power to figure out new things, solve problems, and understand complex ideas. People with strong IT can pick up new languages, math concepts, or even sports skills in no time. It's like having a superpower that lets you absorb information and make connections between different pieces of knowledge. Think of it as the key that unlocks your brain's potential to learn and adapt quickly. It's also closely related to creativity, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills, and is often developed through education, experiences, and practice. Does that make sense? Interval, interval, interval. Let's talk about the word interval. So, interval is a noun, which means it refers to a period of time between two events, activities, or points in space. In common usage, people use interval to describe breaks or gaps, like the time between classes, meetings, or even TV commercials. For example, "I have an hour's interval before my next lecture, so I'll grab some coffee." You might also hear it used in sports and music to talk about rest periods or pauses. Now, here's a special note. When talking about time or space, interval implies a specific length or distance, whereas just saying time or space is more general. For instance, I have some free time next week doesn't necessarily imply an interval. But I have a 30-minute interval between work shifts does. So, be careful with that. In a formal meeting setting, such as a university lecture, a professor might say, "The next module will be presented during the morning interval of our schedule," allowing students to review and prepare for the upcoming exam. This example sentence utilizes the word interval in an academic context, highlighting the specific time slot allocated for a particular activity. In a casual conversation with a friend, you might mention, "I love taking breaks between shows at the festival. It's nice to have an interval to rest my feet and grab some food before the next performance." This example showcases how interval can be used in everyday language to describe a brief pause or break between events. In a business setting, such as a marketing campaign, a company might advertise their new TV commercial break during primetime intervals, capitalizing on peak viewership hours to maximize brand exposure. Here, the word interval is employed to emphasize the specific time slots when the ad will air, effectively targeting a large audience. So you're trying to learn what interval means. Think of it as a block of time between two specific events or points in your schedule, calendar, or even a music piece. The main characteristic is that there's usually a beginning and an end to this block. And you can have multiple blocks like these one after the other. You might be familiar with similar concepts like break, pause, or segment of time. They all refer to dividing your schedule into smaller, more manageable chunks. In practical terms, intervals are used in music theory, where they help musicians understand how much space is needed between notes. But you'll also find them in everyday life when planning appointments, meetings, or even just taking a short break from work. Does that make sense? Lecture. 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 So, let's break down the word lecture. As a part of speech, it can be both a noun and a verb. When used as a noun, it typically refers to a formal talk or address given by an expert or authority figure on a particular subject, usually in an academic setting like a university or college. For example, the professor gave a long lecture on the history of science. As a verb, to lecture means to speak at length to someone about something they've done wrong or haven't done well enough, often with the intention of warning them or correcting their behavior. This can be seen in phrases like, "She had to lecture her child for not doing his homework," or, "The coach lectured the team on their poor performance last night." It's worth noting that when used as a verb, there's sometimes a slightly negative connotation to the word, implying scolding or rebuking. Here are 3 practical example sentences using the word lecture with varying levels of formality. I attended a formal lecture on Monday evening at the university's grand auditorium where Professor Thompson delivered a 2-hour presentation to a packed audience of students and faculty members. The context is a formal academic setting, where the speaker uses the word lecture in its most traditional sense, a formal talk or presentation by an authority figure. My roommate told me that he totally bombed his lecture in psychology class today because he was unprepared for the discussion questions. But I'm sure he'll do better next time. In this context, we're using the word lecture informally to describe a regular classroom session where students receive instruction and participate in discussions. A more conversational tone is used here. The CEO's keynote speech at our company's annual conference was really just a long lecture on why our industry needs to adapt to changing market conditions. I'm not sure it really added any new insights. This context uses the word lecture in a business setting, where the speaker implies that someone's talk or presentation was too lengthy or lacked substance, and thus more like a traditional formal lecture than an engaging discussion. So you're learning English and want to know about this thing called lecture. A lecture is basically an official speech given by an expert in their field, usually in a classroom setting, where they share their knowledge and ideas with students. The main characteristic of a lecture is that it's a one-way conversation. The speaker talks and the listeners listen. It's like a teacher explaining something to their students, but on a larger scale. Some similar concepts or synonyms are talk, speech, or even sermon. In some contexts, what it does or how it's used is that it helps learners absorb new information, get explanations about complex topics, and even see demonstrations of practical skills. Think of it like a guided tour of knowledge, where the speaker shows you around the subject matter.